And in the environment, there's a similar story of humans going after the best, easiest, highest grade ores and substances first before moving on to the lower grade ores and substances. It only makes sense. It's how we're wired, and it makes perfect business sense. Here's a couple gentlemen. They're in Alaska, and they're sitting on a copper nugget. And that's what we found when we first started going out and investigating this vast virgin territory of Alaska, and we were getting resources out of there. It was recent enough that there was a camera involved, so this isn't that long ago. And the story is this: in just 150 years of industrialization and having an industrial economy, we've moved from prosecuting nuggets like that. Then we went to smaller nuggets, but still there were purified nuggets to be found. And then we went to ore grades. Here's a 10% ore grade, that green band. It's gorgeous stuff. And now the largest copper mine in the United States, after just 150 years of industrialization, is this one. This is the Bingham Canyon mine. It used to be a mountain. It's now a hole that's 2.5 miles across and 3/4 of a mile deep. And we are chasing an ore grade there that is 0.2%, 0.2. That means you have to get out 500 pounds of ore in order to get a single pound of copper. Think about that for a minute. Think about the energy it takes to mine 500 pounds from the bottom of that hole, drive it up 3/4 of a mile, bring it off to the smelter, crush it, do what you need to do in order to extract that single pound of copper. It's a different story from a 10% ore grade where it only took 10 pounds to get that done. And so this is the story we're in. And if we look at a number of other critical elements that are out there. So if you don't remember your periodic table, we've got strontium, and we've got silver, and tin, and gold, and zinc, and all of these elements that we're out pulling out of the ground. And for the past 40 years, we've pulled out of the ground, on average, 2% more of these ores than we did the year before. So every year, we're looking at 2%, just 2% more of whatever it happens to be, copper, bauxite, tin, whatever. And if we ask the question of all known reserves in the world today, all known reserves, if we continue to pull them out at 2% more per year going forward, how long will known reserves last? And so for things like zinc and gold and tin and other things, we can now look at a number of things. Everything on that chart has 20 years or less left of known reserves. 20 years. 20 years. So my youngest child, my daughter, is 11, and if she lives to the same age as my grandfather, she will die in the year 2094, which is so far beyond peak on all of these things that it's really a frightening thought. So here's an idea, here's a thought on how to get this exponentials in our head as well. Somebody who is alive, who is 22 years old today, has been alive when half of all the oil ever burned has been burnt. And that happens because we're constantly using more and more and more, exponentially more, maybe 2% more a year. And so when we look at these resource extraction profiles, first we go out and find all the big nuggets, and then the smaller nuggets, and then we find the lesser grade ores, and finally we're down to the 0.2% stuff. And we find that we have an extraction peak that we can find for anything that is a non-renewable natural resource. And the thing that's important in this story, the most important part of this story, is that the amount of energy it takes to go after those lower and lower grade ores is not linear. It goes up exponentially. It explodes. And of course, costs are a function of energy, so they will follow along with that. So now the whole story that I have is we have an economy that must grow. It's connected to an energy system that we no longer think can grow. And we have a story of depletion that is there for anybody with a slightly longish term horizon view. Anybody involved with an endowment or a pension or an entitlement program who is building a capital plant of some kind that's going to last for 40 years or more, was thinking about putting in a parking garage or another highway in some form, needs to be aware of this story, because there's everything that we think we know about how the world works is going to change dramatically in the next 20 years. So this is all, the takeaway from these three sets of words here: must grow, can't grow, and depleting. That is the crash course in summary. I spell it out in greater detail in the book, and I spend a lot more time in the online course to connect those sets of dots. But that's the summary of the story. And so the contest, as I see it right now, is between an oil system that no longer can grow, and that's the data, right? Remember, discovery peak is more than 40 years ago, and it's versus, on one side we've got oil, and on the other side we have a human-based money system that absolutely has to grow in order to function well. Reality on your left, money system on the right. How does this story turn out? Well, my main summary of that is that I think that it's our money system that's poorly designed, not reality. All right, come on. No kids were harmed in the making of this Photoshop. All right. It's the money system that's poorly designed. It's not, there's nothing wrong with the world and how it was created. And so the question I have, is that a problem or a predicament? Are we facing something that we can tweak with a few minor policy adjustments, or are we facing something more profound? And when I look at the Deepwater Horizon, which blew up, right? It was chasing a field that was 18,000 feet down under the ocean. And if the Deepwater Horizon had not blown up and had been able to pull all of the oil in that find to the surface and put it out onto the world for use, it would have lasted the world somewhere around 12 to 24 hours. Everything you need to know about where we are in the oil depletion story is captured in that one piece of information. When we're using the most elaborate technology known to man to chase something that's going to supply the world with maybe 12 hours of oil production, maybe 24, it tells you that that's what's left. There are no big fields to chase. BP wasn't doing this to keep their engineers busy. They were doing it because that's what's left. When we look at all of the trouble spots that are brewing in the Middle East, and we understand the oil depletion story, and we understand that that's where all the oil is, it makes perfect sense what's going on with NATO actions, with other actions, with all the unrest that's going on in that territory. It makes perfect sense in the context of the oil depletion story. The global financial system, this is perfectly predictable what is happening right now. If you take a giant complex system, which is what our economy is, and you starve it for energy, you will see things exactly unfolding like we are seeing right now. My prediction is that we will see more of these things unfold because there's nothing we can do about them from a monetary standpoint. The days of pulling the monetary lever and driving interest rates to zero and flooding the world with money, those no longer have traction because on the other side there's this thing that's happening to us, which is that oil is in very short supply, especially high net energy oil. So is that fixable or not? I submit to you that it's not fixable. What we need to do instead is wrap our minds around the idea that we're going to face a very different future. And that doesn't mean bad or dark or awful necessarily. There are lots of things that we can do right now, today, that will have tremendous opportunities before us. But first we have to get the story right. We have to know whether we're facing a problem or predicament and what the nature of that story is. And so I think that investing is not easy still, but it's doable. And I certainly stand before you as somebody who's been able to have very good returns in his own investment portfolio. I've changed my life, where I work, how I educate my children, what I invest in, what I don't do, what I do, what I've started doing. Everything has shifted once I put this lens of this story I just gave you in very abbreviated form. This story has literally changed everything about who I am and what I do. And I sit before you as somebody who feels happier, that I have a higher quality of life, that I am more financially secure, and that I am actually facing insurmountable opportunity because there are an incredible number of things that have to be done if this story I've told you is true or not. And so I don't ask that you believe me. I ask that you hold open the idea that I might be right in this story. Investigate it for yourself, look at it, scratch at it, debate it, decide it's false. I actually I don't really have care around that. What I do care about is that you at least consider it and that you don't just reject it out of hand without really going through the trouble of figuring out what the story is and why you would reject it. Thank you.